Okay, so this is more from the standpoint of what I expect to happen, but also what we should make sure happens. And there are three main points. The first one is that we need to demand more rationality than we have before. And I mean something very specific by it. Why is it? The younger generation has grown up with computers, as did I, believe it or not. And they demand crisp thinking in a way that previous generations haven't had to. And so, Venn diagram humor is a thing which never would have flown 20 years ago. And it's very specifically that this guy, James Flynn, has been able to more or less prove that IQs keep having, in order to keep IQ at 100 points, the average IQ, they have to keep dialing down the more conceptual part of IQ. And the flip side of that is that it's definitely, people are learning to be much more rational. And I mean in terms of thinking about categories. So I think there's going to be a big generational shift there. There already is. And people are thinking more conceptually. And a lot of what people used to call common sense 20 years ago just isn't. So there's a lot of impatience across the generations, but I think we're moving much more towards a sort of crisper way of thinking. The next thing is that I'm saying that we're going to have platforms. We're going to have many of the things we heard about today were platforms, and I'll explain that. But basically, if something is big, we have to make it a platform. And what that means is that something like a street is a platform that you have the businesses and the residents and the buildings and everything on either side are served by the access and the plumbing and the electricity. So a street is a platform, and we're going to have to change the way that we think about them. Banks are not generally platforms, but should be. In other words, they should be clearer about what the different offerings are and generally more transparent so that you can use it as a device. Government should be a platform. There's a big push now for government as a platform. You can Google it. Basically, it's saying using the government as an operating system, getting information out and feeding it back in, for example, that sort of thing. And on top of it, you support a lot of small actors. And you want more variety in it. It's sort of the opposite of franchise. You don't want to control things so much. You kind of want to build in some variety. The last thing is, I call it comity, not comedy. But if we think back to 1900, things were very different, and I think there's a particular reason. So why does this building, it's a very modest building, why does it have a false front? Why was there so much exuberance, ornament and all that? Also, why was mostly everything was pretty polite. Most of the buildings were polite and the public spaces. There were very few proprietary systems, wrenches that only work with a particular computer manufacturer, say. And there was also a lot of concern over standards, like that's when they started to systematize the screw sizes. And there's some different pieces to this that I think are emerging as being important. So the first piece is advertising and display. So if you think of a Victorian building, there's a sort of a peacock aspect to it. But there's also the decorum, solidity. It's respectable. It's not going to fall apart. It should be safe. They generally were less safe then, but that was a big selling point at the time even. And they can be extended and repaired. And I think that the key is respect. There's a quote, this is from the Declaration of Independence, and it's talking about something else, but it says, we need to think about a decent respect for the opinions of mankind. And to me, that kind of runs in my head, I forgot, took out a slide. So if you think of Angie's List, or any of the rating systems that you find on Amazon or something like that, in personal space that you talk about somebody's reputation, I think that that's going to be much more important in the next, from now on, it's going to increase in importance. And we'll have to be a little bit less reliant on money as the source of value and any kind of indicator as to what's worthwhile. It used to be if somebody had a lot of money, that meant they were worthy of respect. I think that's going to have to change just because there's so little money in at least the sort of the vassals end of the spectrum, not in the sort of owners end of the spectrum. So the last thing is where the new urbanism has been, this is actually has been called the old urbanism with better parking. I think it's going to be much more open source and maker. God knows we heard about that a lot today, where you have to be able to look under the hood. It's not a product that you can't open up. You have to be able to look under the hood. You have to be able to change things. You have to be able to build your own. And there has to be a sort of respect amongst peers and a building up of reputation more than just money.
Thanks, Bruce.